The Cuyahoga County Committee of the Whole, for purposes of the biennial operating budget and also later on the schematic design for the Convention Center Hotel project. The meeting is called to order. Clerk will please call the roll.
Calling the roll, Ms. Simon. Here. Mr. Greenspan.
Here.
Mr. Miller.
Here.
Mr. Brady.
Here.
Mr. Germana.
Here.
Mr. Gallagher.
Here.
Mr. Schron.
Here.
Ms. Conwell.
Here.
Mr. Jones.
Here.
Mr. Rogers.
Here.
And Ms. Conley.
Here.
There's
Anyone signed in for public comment?
Mr. Chairman, no one has signed in to speak.
Thank you very much. And the next item, item number 3, is the biennial operating budget. Would you please read that into the record?
Resolution number 2013-0229, a resolution adopting the 2014-2015 biennial operating budget and capital improvements program and declaring the necessity that this resolution become immediately effective.
Okay. Before we start with Director Gauntner, I would like to ask if Director Parks would please come forward. Is he not here? Trevor, could you please see if you could contact him? Thank you. Okay. Director Gauntner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of council, and please let me express my gratitude for the scheduling of our time here today. Did you know that almost half the kids in Cuyahoga County get their health care through the programs that you fund within Job and Family Services? Did you know that this last year we hit what is unlikely, not likely to be a high tide, but we went over 200,000 households who received one or more benefits in Cuyahoga County? Did you know we had a record year for child support with respect to our federal measures about paternity establishment and support order establishment? Did you know that for the last year, Cuyahoga Job and Family Services was the conduit for $3 billion with a B dollars in benefits to the people of Cuyahoga County, having the greatest short-term economic impact on the community of any part of county government? Did you know that in the fall we had 7,600 dads show up for our Walk Your Child to School Day? Who we serve, really, I'm not going to go through the statistics again, but really, we serve to establish fraternities, to establish support orders, to collect funds, to assist individuals in our communities who might access one or more of our benefits. For the balance of my 5 minutes today, really what I would like to do is to talk briefly about a handful of issues that are on the slide that, if I could ask for the clerk's assistance to put that up, and I believe you all have these on your desk as well. There are several developments, some of which have started, some of which will be kicking off after the first of the year, that will have some significant impacts on the work to be done at Cuyahoga Job and Family Services. The state is implementing a new eligibility system, and while originally, like all new systems, we expect there will be some quirks, the biggest issue for us is that they will be slowly transitioning in the new caseloads. They are going to start with Medicaid in January, take about 9 months to do that, not go on to the other benefit programs we administer, cash assistance and food stamps, to the subsequent year. By about July of next year, we will be administering about 100,000 cases in 2 systems. What that means, quite literally, you need to change an address, you change it here, then you got to go change it there. If somebody comes in and wants to apply for Medicaid and food stamps, that's good, that's what we're here for. We'll take them into this system and we'll say thank you, and then we'll say, and by the way, we need to repeat all the same data entry in the other system. So for the time of this transition, there will be a significant impact. Our TANF work participation rate, we've spoken about this in the past. There is a federal required measure of 50% While we have gone up about 20% over where we were a year ago, for the last 4 or 5 months, we continue to bounce around in the mid-40s. We are continuing to push this measure, and it is our goal to affect the 50% threshold. Child support collections. We just had our best month as in terms of percentage of collections collected in the last 5 years. What that means, though, is that we collected 62% of the current child support that was owed during that period. Across the state of Ohio, if you plot the smallest counties and the largest counties, you'll see the largest counties clustered at those lower ratios. There is a direct relationship. Nonetheless, we will do better, and as part of our planning to increase support collections for the current year. Client service access continues to be an issue from every once in a while. Some of you, in addition to other folks within the community, may contact my office or our customer relations staff. We are working on a couple things immediately as we speak. We've put together a group of our line staff and managers and some technology people, one, to figure out what is it we can do just with the current time and resources we have. Secondly, are there some other changes that we can implement on the technology side that will allow us to do a better job of documenting our response to individuals and holding ourselves accountable. One of the changes that has gone into effect with respect to the food stamp program, and forgive me, there are actually two, as of November 1st, there was an enhanced level of benefit that was part of the food stamp program that was funded by the federal stimulus. That expired, and not just in the state of Ohio or Cuyahoga County, but nationally. I estimate the dollar impact of that change, which is manifest in reduced benefits paid out as of November 1st, at approximately $20 million per year. So that has happened, and it's a direct result of the end of that federal stimulus piece. The governor of the state of Ohio chose not to continue a longstanding waiver for this group of individuals who are referred to as able-bodied adults without dependents. Basically, it's the intent there is to describe individuals ages 18 to 49 who are not disabled, who do not have minor children. And the waiver was with respect to work programs and the necessity of having some involvement in a work activity to claim the benefits. Unlike the TANF program, there's not a substantive, really much of any budget that goes with this. We would get about $30 per individual per year to help them engage in work activities and go to work. Nonetheless, the immediate situation is that we need to complete an appraisal on some 29,000 individuals. Our target is to do this by the end of January. We expect out of those 29,000 individuals, some will say, hey, Joe, for the average benefit, $160, I don't think I want to do 20 hours a week of work participation. We expect some folks to tell us, well, since it hasn't been important in the past to tell you why I'm exempt because of a disability, et cetera, let me show you my paperwork there that I am exempt for this work requirement for a known reason. Some folks will be working, and again, because the waiver was not into effect, we would have not have documented it in the employment portion of their screens. This initial burst of activity to do an appraisal of these 29,000 individuals is then followed by a requirement, as the state regulation would tell us, to provide some kind of work site or work setting. We will be starting to do that initially with an amendment to our community work experience contract, which will generate a small number of slots, and we anticipate doing additional planning. Two last things, Medicaid expansion. I'm sure folks are aware that the State Controlling Board had affected an action to expand Medicaid in the state of Ohio. According to the projections of the State Office of Health Transformation that were originally surfaced in the spring as part of the state budget, our anticipation would be in Cuyahoga County that by July of 2015, we would, as many as 84,000 additional individuals would enroll. By virtue of the demographics of this group, most of these individuals will be unique cases or households. So this will create, if you think of a household as a case, this will generate an increase in our caseload of 25 to 35% as that unfolds. Lastly, just to comment, and I know the people in this body know this as well or better than I do. You know, really what we believe is that the best benefit we can offer people who can work is a job. Some of the challenges of our community, though, with respect to that, and not just here, but nationally, we're really at about a 60-year high with respect to the percentage of the unemployed who have been employed more than 27 weeks. And where we stand nationally is that 38% of the unemployed today have been unemployed for over 6 months. And this is the highest it's been in the last 60 years. Similarly, the share of the overall adult population, and this is a national number, not a Cuyahoga County number, though from our experience, we track nationally, but typically we're just a little better. The share of the adult population overall is at its lowest point in the last 30 years, that 60% of working age adults have a benefit. Mr. Chairman, that concludes my remarks, and obviously I'd be happy to answer questions or respond further.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Before we open up to questions, I would like to ask Joanne if you had anything that you wanted to add regarding the food stamp situation.
Mr. Chair, I don't have anything to add. I did provide council with a number of charts and figures that show what at least the food bank's estimate of some of the impacts of these food stamp cuts and the needs across the county.
Okay.
So, thank you.
Okay. And Director, in light of the passage of the Health and Human Services levy, is it your recommendation that the targeted budget reduction that was listed in the budget book be restored?
Mr. Chairman, it would be hard put for me to disagree with your thinking on that. I might respectfully refer that issue to Mr. Merriman, who I believe was going to respond with respect to specific budget questions.
Okay. And questions by my colleagues, starting with the chairman of the Health and Human Services Committee, Councilman Brady.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Gottner, I'd like you to go back to the issue of the food stamp cuts. I know we've had a discussion about this just last week, I think, and I'm interested in a couple of different parts of this. One, you've stated that it's the responsibility, I believe, if I get this right, of the county to do an assessment of the 29,000 so people who are going to be affected by this, and you gave some examples of what we might find after we try to contact them. I'd like to know who's going to do, because of the nature of this, sure. And the fact that you have to really gear up, really quickly, almost in a crisis kind of style, emergency style at least. How you intend to carry on that assessment in terms of who will do it, will there be overtime involved? How are we going to get this done?
Certainly, Mr. Brady, through the chair. The county has the obligation to do an assessment or appraisal, we use these terms basically interchangeably, of these 29,000 individuals who currently, according to our records, are not exempt from the work requirement. Just a reason for some of these exemptions: somebody could be pregnant, somebody could be in alcohol or drug treatment program, someone could have a long-term disability that for whatever reason is not documented, someone could have really a short-term disability, some barrier that keeps them from working. So an individual could be caring for a disabled family member, either on a short-term or a long-term basis. Our initial attempt in terms of doing these appraisals will be to do them on the phone from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., Monday through Saturday. We started this on a pilot basis this last Saturday. We will be continuing basically at least through mid-December. Individuals who we are not successful in speaking with on the phone, we will be sending them an appointment to come in and see us to review their food stamp case. I have very early data just from Saturday, and and I would not want to generalize, but really what we're seeing, and generalize in terms of percentages, excuse me, but we're really seeing patterns as I kind of referenced. Some folks are saying, gee, no thanks. Other folks are saying, I have this other condition I've not told you about. Some folks are working, they're in another work activity that would make them eligible, allow them to count for meeting their work requirement. A good number, and as yet unknown number of this population, we don't have a working phone number for, so we know the number of folks that we will be calling in will be significant. Our intent then is by the end of January to have touched all 29,000 of these individuals and to made a determination. If someone says, I'm willing to participate, but I need your help, county, we will involve the initial individuals in that within the programming that we currently have contracted out for, or others that we might be able to arrange in the near term. Others may wind up going on a waiting list. If individuals decline to participate when they are called in, they would be sanctioned. To remove the sanction, they would have to perform 80 hours of this work activity before their benefits could be reestablished.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Follow up to this question. Okay, we're going to have employees of the county calling 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. Obviously, that's going to cost something, not to mention the wear and tear on everybody. So is that built into our budget? Do we know what kind of money we're talking about?
The funds that we would require for the current budget year, we've been able to find within our existing budget. We think it could quite reasonably be $800,000 or more in terms of overtime. And while folks are making, some calls during the day, they got the rest of their work to do. So really, the primary emphasis in terms of making these calls will be during, the overtime hours and before and after working on Saturday. So the hope would be, I'm sorry if I may add one thing, Mr. Brady, is that, in some cases, well, I called you, but I left you a message, so you call back. And so I assume that some of it will be concluded during the day as well.
What will then all the people making these calls be employees of Cuyahoga County?
All the individuals making these calls will be employees of Cuyahoga County. There are individuals who currently work within our eligibility processes. For the most part, they will be eligibility specialists. In some cases, it may be their supervisory staff who today also occasionally do eligibility work alongside an eligibility worker.
Mr. Chairman, to Mr. Contner, if we're not able to reach people by phone, do we have any plans for other ways to try to reach people?
We do. For individuals, and we will make this call as to when we will send out this notice after we get through some weeks of this experience, but individuals whom we are not able to reach by phone, and I'll just give you a possible date of, say, by the second or third week of December, we will send a notice to our last known address with them, giving them an appointment to come into the office to pursue a review of their case.
Mr. Chairman, if you'll bear with me, it's one line of thought. How many hours again are these folks required to work in order to be eligible?
To the councilman through the chair, Mr. Chairman, there are a couple different answers to that, and they are related through some vagaries, not vagaries, but some differences in federal law and state administrative rule. If an individual who has to fulfill this work requirement engages in an activity called community work experience, so this would think basically volunteering at a public sector or a private nonprofit entity. That individual would have to do a number of hours equivalent to their total grant divided by minimum wage. So if the average benefit grant is about $160, and just for my weak math purposes, we say that the minimum wage is $8 an hour, that's about 20 hours, a little more. But if an individual would say, you know, Joe, there's also this activity called unpaid work. So for an example, if an individual could document they do unpaid work with their landlord. In that situation, unpaid work would require them to perform 20 hours a week versus the 20 hours a month approximately that they'd be required to do under community work experience.
I guess the assumption is that they're being compensated in some way that may or may not be on the books for
I think that's
unpaid
reasonable,
work.
Mr. Brady. I haven't heard that myself, but I
Right.
think that's a reasonable
Final
interpretation.
question along these lines. I know the county has responsibility to try to help find some kind of part-time work, and I know that's really very difficult to do, at least for such a large number of people. Are we prepared with our existing programs to take the best shot we can at doing our duty here, or are we going to need to have additional resources in order to do that?
To the councilman through the chair, the resources that we have lined up at present, we have funds to complete the required activities, at least within this budget year, which we were described for the overtime project. An amendment was approved today, I believe, at the controlling board or the contracts and purchasing board. Forgive me, I'm not sure which one of those two was approved this morning to provide some additional community work experience slots. We have some additional funds available to us within our current budget, which we are beginning to draft an RFP. And really, here's what we want to do. For the initial amendment that was approved today, basically what it is, it's unpaid work experience. It's something for somebody to do to allow them to keep their benefit. What we know from the research about those programs is that they don't move people on. Someone could be, packing bags at the food center, a couple hours a week for here and forever. That kind of activity just generally doesn't move people on. In this next set of proposals that we're packaging that we believe we could fund within current budget resources and obligate funds for that, we are looking to see how could we establish 2 tracks. And basically what I mean by that is if you want to keep your benefit, okay, we'll help you get placed here to volunteer your time. But if you want to really get a job and do something, let's see how we can help you do that. Now, though that second track typically is more expensive than the first. That being said, though, it seems inappropriate to me for me to be recommending to this body or to the county executive that we should just be recommending expenses that kind of keep people where we are. So we're trying to identify some program options and a slice of the resources that would help individuals to move on who are willing to make that kind of investment, in their own experience. That being said, not surprisingly, many individuals in this situation are going to have multiple challenges, especially in our immediate job market. There are going to be high rates here of individuals, who don't have high school or GED, homeless folks out of the 2100 shelter program. These are individuals who are among the poorest of the poor, if you will, in our community, and by virtue of their demographic here are also not part of a family system or structure from which they may be able to have some help with housing or whatever.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. See what my colleagues have to say and whether it's necessary or not for me to return.
Okay. Councilman Schrock.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And following up on Mr. Brady's line of questions or comments, as you indicated, the highest form of benefit that we can provide, I think, was trying to get a job for any of the individuals, and I applaud you for that recognition. I think that's exactly where we need to be, but it doesn't sound, at least reading the attached article that we are even getting close to being on that track. We're in the reverse. It looks like we're 10. Was it your article said that we're now month after month after month at the record low on jobs in the entire country, which is kind of a sad thing to think that we're putting forth that as a goal and we're achieving something less than that goal, it would seem like, significantly less. What would you recommend that we might do with the budget to actually achieve the goal that you said is your highest form of goal? And how would you restructure that? Because we're talking here about budgets, how we spend the money, and if we're not spending it efficiently and effectively to achieve that number one goal, then we're spending the money for goals that are secondary to that number one goal, it seems to me, at least the logic. So what would you do if you really were controlling the budget yourself?
Mr. Schron, through the chair, you know, my personal patron saints are FDR and Dorothy Day, folks who believe that people have a right to eat, they have a right to housing, they have a right to a job that pays a living wage. They should be free from want, as Mr. Roosevelt would tell us. You know, I mean, not speaking for the administration and speaking generally hypothetically, and I realize it's inherently non-responsive to your question, but you know, can we put 5,000 people to work with a large-scale public employment program? I mean, we have resources. We probably don't have that level of resources. But if the issue is a job, let's create jobs. The other work that this council and the administration have been engaged in, looking at the long-term economic aspects of our community, that is the work that is directly responsive to these needs. The downside of that is that these things work in different economic cycles. You know, I got 29,000 people who need something to do in January, and the odds are we're not going to create that number of jobs by then.
So your suggestion would be to go into the public sector to create the jobs then?
I would, if we could create 5,000 additional jobs in this community, I think that'd be wonderful.
Does that constitute the moving on type jobs that you were referring to? Or is that the jobs that you were referring to that don't really seem to move on, but they're just there?
Well, what I was referring to was the Community Work Experience Program, which is unpaid work, which an individual technically, you know, doesn't have the same stake in or the same opportunity to move up. You know, what we need are jobs where individuals can be in, they see a relationship between their income and their effort, and there's an opportunity to move up and move more.
Thank you.
Ms. Conwell.
Through the chair to the director, are we going to follow up on these, where these individuals show up, these 29,000 individuals? Is there going to be some kind of data where you're following the hunger centers, the shelters, things of that nature?
To the councilman through the chair, here is at this point the data that we anticipate having. Whether or not we contacted people, because I expect that one of the things that will happen, we will try to call someone, we won't be successful in reaching them, we will mail them a notice, they will either have moved or chosen not to come in. So we will have data whether or not we contacted them. We will have data that shows us an aggregate how many people were already working or engaged in an activity that allowed them to be eligible for the program. We expect to have data that tells us how many individuals provided us with information showing that they were exempt from the work requirement, whereas we didn't have that information before. What we expect for some portion of this population, as I've said too, I mean, we have begun to have data too. Some folks will say, hey Joe, $160, 20 hours a week, thank you, but you know, I don't want to continue. So I expect we will have data along those dimensions. Where we will not have data were for individuals who either in the short term or longer term walk away from us, if you will, that they decide that, you know, I don't want to pursue this line of action, or they don't follow up, and maybe then they come in 2 months later. But we will also have data then on how this impacts the overall food stamp payroll in Cuyahoga County. And we're talking, I don't think I mentioned this number when I was speaking before, the current annual estimated benefit payroll for these 29,000 individuals is 52 million. So even a marginal loss of that to our community will be significant if you think of that as part of the food budget, and then recognizing that that is a reduction on top of the approximate value of 20 million in the reduction in the food stamp benefits that happened as a result of the end of the stimulus-related benefits as of November 1st.
So through the chair, if they don't show up to answer the phone or get a notice, are they automatically discontinued?
If we attempt to call them and aren't able to, and we send them a notice to come in, if they do not come in, their benefits will be discontinued.
Okay, and I just want to get this
Sure.
clear in my head. So these are 29,000 people that have to work in order to still continue to receive the SNAP
Correct,
program?
or to show to us that they're exempt. And there will be some situations, you know, that maybe over the last month, one of these folks moved into a household with somebody else. So the demographics of their situation. Maybe they have a broken leg. Maybe they weren't pregnant when we spoke to them 6 months ago, but they are pregnant now.
So I'm concerned about I know we must do what we must do on all budget levels, but the 29,000 people, I understand the data that you're talking about, but there should be data like for those that just don't come in. They don't want to, or they have barriers that they don't feel that they can work those 20 hours a week for the food stamps. They're going to show up somewhere else.
That's
in
right,
somebody
and-
else's data.
excuse me.
And so
Yeah.
that's where I'm wondering, are we going to?
We will have, Councilman through the chair, we will have incomplete data. You know, at the end of the day, it's kind of like Wendy's. What they say is, you know, you got to eat. Some number of these folks, looking at the whole 29,000, will, through friends or family or current situation, they'll be fine. Some number of these folks will, you know, maybe go find a new friend or family member and be fine. My fears is that some number, hopefully very modest, will wind up eating at 2,100. They'll wind up eating upstairs in this building. They'll wind up eating in the psychiatric hospitals.
We've had cutbacks. I'm sure you've been in this business for quite a while. We've had cutbacks like this previously, to your knowledge. Could you give us
To
a
the
rough
councilman through the chair, I cannot recall specific food stamp cutbacks similar to this. The one event that was similar in the history of human services, if you will, there used to be actually two, forgive me. One, we went through this issue of the work requirements and the adult able-bodied individuals in the late 90s when a year or two after the legislation was originally passed. I don't recall what our total caseload was then, but we saw the same kinds of situations. A couple years after that, though, when we hit 2000 and the economy kind of nationally took a slide, the federal government made available a broad range of waivers, and Ohio for many years had accepted that. The other time in which we had seen the circumstance goes back to the late 80s and the end of the financial program, I believe was called General Relief, which was a very modest financial subsidy to single adults without kids. And that was perhaps the other event of a similar nature, Councilwoman.
Last question through the chair. Concerned about the 650 employees that may be laid off from Bank of America. So can you walk me through if they need food stamp assistance? They're able-bodied, so they won't be added onto this program. What
Well,
happens in their
here's one
case?
of the ironies of this, Councilman, and through the chair, and I'm going to ask one of my colleagues to be sure I say this correct. If you're on unemployment, you aren't subject to these requirements. So if you worked in a good paying job and you got laid off and you get unemployment and your family size is big enough that you'd qualify for food stamps, you aren't subject to these requirements. If you worked for a very marginal level job, even though you worked regularly and didn't qualify for unemployment, then you're subject to these requirements. Welcome.
Mr. Chairman?
Yep.
Could I just say, and I apologize if this has been said, there's just a couple things I just wanted to note for the benefit of council and the public. First of all, I just wanted to publicly thank Joe and his team. First of all, they feel passionately about this issue. You can probably tell that. It's a core at who Joe is, but also they under extraordinary pressure have been scrambling to try to comply with this mostly unfunded mandate out of the state. And they have really, I think, all the counties have been in, I shouldn't say all the counties, I'll get to that point in a second, but a lot of counties have been in this boat where all of a sudden we have to figure out how to comply with something for thousands and thousands of families and individuals. And Joe and his team have done an outstanding job trying to figure out how in the world to comply with that. Secondly, and I apologize, Joe, if you already made this point, not all counties are subjected to this. There were waivers that are continuing to be, that are still being granted to counties in Ohio. But some counties it was determined that their employment situation was so good that they were going to be subjected to this additional requirement. Other counties, because of their unemployment rate, as it's officially reported, they said, well, there's not enough jobs there, so they're not going to be subjected to this provision. Think about the irony of that, since we have one of the highest poverty rates in the United States. But somehow, by this formula that they're using, we're being subjected to this, whereas other counties are not. The other thing is, and Joe probably made this point too, this was a choice by the state. The state did not have to do this. The state chose to do it. It wasn't even to balance the state budget. It was done because of an ideological position that this should be done. Now, people can disagree or agree about ideology, but they could have done it in a time schedule that allowed us to really transition people out in a way that would fit more both with their needs and our own budgetary needs. And that wasn't done either. And it's just, it's ironic to me because when we're talking about whether there's a war on the poor or not, if there's a war on the poor, it isn't rhetorical, it's substantive. And this is a substantive policy that is going to be imposed on thousands of people in this county. And I can tell you, counties all over, I'm proud of the way that we're handling it, because I can tell you there are counties in this state that are just washing their hands of the whole situation, just saying, we can't even comply with it. So everyone is just going to be thrown off without any real attempt to even try to place them anywhere because it was done on such a short schedule. Maybe those points were made by Joe before, but I just thought the council should know that also. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Executive, and we're going to go on to Councilman Jones is next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Joe, my question really was sparked when the comment was made, 5,000, could you create 5,000 jobs? What if someone started a business? Does that qualify them as well as someone would just start their own business?
If someone is engaged in an activity and, they have income to show from that, I believe that would qualify. That's my understanding. Yes, sir.
And this is just a half-baked idea, just came to me. What if there was, for 29,000 people, a business created that was like an Amway, where you created a company where the product might not be what Amway sells, but was what the needs of the 29,000 able-bodied people, whether it be food, clothing, whatever was needed, and then they could themselves start to provide for themselves, sell within themselves, and then qualify for the services, but at the same time have a vehicle to further their own lives. That's just a thought, and it's undeveloped, but it would seem like a way to, and I say that because there are 6 ladies who live in my district who basically started a co-op amongst themselves where they provided for one another daycare service, food, other things, just to help themselves out. So again, somewhere in that vein, would be a way of creating 29,000 jobs. And again, like I said, just a thought, but.
Thank you.
Okay, Councilman Rogers.
Thank you. And Joanne, you may have already said this, but how many of these 29,000 individuals do you think we will actually be able to reach? And if there's any way of you to make a determination of how many of that 29,000 do you think will still qualify to stay on the program and receive benefits?
To the councilman through the chair, it's too early in this process for me to give you an estimate of the percentage that we're going to be able to reach. I think after we're calling for another week or so, I'll be in a better position to do that. In addition to other forums, I believe that Mr. Brady is organizing a discussion around hunger issues at an upcoming Health and Human Services Committee, but happy to share data and whatever formats are available. My personal estimate, and this is admittedly not scientific, is that I'm guessing that by April of this year, we'll see about a 40% reduction of this 29,000 individuals. And that is not, I don't have hard data. I mean, to really back that up, but just having seen some similar examples as I was discussing with Councilwoman Conwell, and this is a population, this particular population tends to be kind of mobile population, which, there aren't kids going to the doctor there, so population that we have some of the least contact with and tend to go in and out. So that's my estimate, Councilman, but admittedly I cannot give you real hard variables for its basis.
And then just on the 52 million, that 52 million is directly related to the 29,000?
Yes, sir, to the councilman through the chair. If my math is correct, the 52 million represents 29,000 individuals times an average benefit of $160 a month times 12.
And that's 100% of that 52 goes back out to people, or is there?
No, 100% of that amount is the food stamp benefit, estimated food stamp benefit payroll for this population.
Okay. There's no
no administrative costs in there. That's pure dollars at the grocery store.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Conley.
Yes, I just wanted to wish Mr. Gauntner well. I understand on Thursday he's defending his PhD dissertation, and we'll all be keeping you in our thoughts and prayers, and I'm sure we'll be soon calling you Dr. Gauntner.
Thank you, Ms. Conley.
I share those wishes.
Thank you.
Councilman Gallagher.
Mr. Gauntner, you had stated, trying to figure out how to put this. Help me out. The work requirement comes from where?
In federal law, there are a couple different aspects, a couple different sets of regulations that govern employment-related activities. The particular population here that we're talking about, the federal government refers to as ABODs, able-bodied adults without dependents. It is a federal regulation that most states, including, as I understand, most states in the Midwest today, have chosen to ask for and receive a waiver from its implementation. So the core of the requirement is a federal requirement, if I understand the question that you're asking me. Whether or not the requirement is operationalized is the result of a decision by our state government to no longer seek its continuance as adjoining states have.
So originally, a state government removed the requirement, and now the state government's requiring it. Is that what I'm hearing?
If I could just say that a little differently. It's my understanding that the federal government, going back to around the year 2000, proposed a set of waivers that states could apply for. Ohio and many other states applied for it. Ohio could have continued it after October 1st, as other states chose to do, and Ohio chose not to ask for the waiver to be continued.
Okay. And and I don't know if you can even qualify this, quantify it. Yearly, how many people, even with the non-work requirement, voluntarily identify the fact that they don't need food stamps and fall off?
Forgive me, Councilman, I'm not entirely understanding the question.
Well, how many people voluntarily identify they don't need food stamps yearly and notify us, no longer are we needing this benefit?
If I understand the councilman's question through the chair, you're asking me how many folks who would be eligible for food stamps, in effect, say to the county, no, thank you?
Or they're on the rolls and they remove themselves?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't have an answer for that.
If you can get that, I'd be interested to see that number.
I will go, Councilman, we will go back and look at, we have a range of codes, reasons that a case closes. I'm not 100% certain I could decipher that factoid from that, but we will look for that.
Okay, and finally, I think I misheard you. You're spending $800,000 in overtime to identify these folks?
To the councilman through the chair, yes.
Wouldn't it be much simpler, because wherever they're being identified by the federal government or the state, where they're getting their benefit, we would have a good address. Wouldn't it behoove us to just send a letter and rely on that as opposed to personal contact, which is going to cost us $800,000, which I would argue would be better off in the program itself?
To the councilman through the chair, we are required to have personal contact. We can't, as I understand it, just send them a form to send in and fill in.
And
The reason that we're doing the telephone piece is that if you think of, so we're going to have a 15-minute conversation or 20-minute conversation on the phone versus going down to get someone, bringing them up to your desk, taking them back. We think that in general we can do the required appraisals with less staff time by doing them on the phone for individuals who are accessible to that.
And the state requires personal contact?
Yes, sir. And really, it's the, if I may just add, it's really kind of the timing of this. Suddenly, we got to pick up all the pieces.
Councilman Trent.
Thank you. How many states have actually opted on the waiver as far as the October 1st?
You know, I don't know that, Councilman. I would attempt to find that out for you, though.
Yeah, if you could get that would be appreciative. And at least I'm going back to your comment that the highest form of on the bullet points as far as key elements was to try and find a job or a meaningful job.
The best benefit we
Best
would
benefit
offer
we can do.
people is a job that has a, you know, a fair living wage. Yes.
So that would then say that every state should have chosen to not do the waiver if they're following that as the number one objective. We would
Councilman,
actually.
this may sound harsh, and I have great respect for you, but I would say that's only true if we don't care whether or not people eat while they're looking for a job.
Okay. Well, I'm just listening to your words. Don't try and put words in my mouth. Your words were that the highest form was to find a job. The waiver on October 1st, as you suggested, was state by state. And we don't know how many states have done that, but that would indicate they were following your words, at least by concept. Whether or not the execution was there, is a different subject.
I might respectfully disagree. I think the fact that the county gets $30 to help each individual address their moving to employment needs for the year kind of supports a position that there's no real expectation that people are going to move to work or receive any meaningful assistance in doing so.
Okay, but the federal government is actually who imposed this, not the state of Ohio, it sounds to me. The work
Councilman,
requirement.
I understand the point you're making, and yet I think there was another choice at the state level that could have said, hey, we're going to do it, we're going to do it right, we're going to take a year to plan it, and we're not going to carry out this waiver after next October, but, you know that we got, 9 or 10 months to really plan what to do with these 30,000 people.
Okay, and I would appreciate knowing how many of the other 49 states have opted one way or the other in regards to this, so we actually have the facts in front of us as opposed to the supposition. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Fair enough, sir.
Mr. Chair,
Thank you.
can I just make one point that I think is also relevant to that, Councilman? And that is, how is that individual state, since we all went, the whole country went through a recession, but some states have a different employment picture than others. There are states that have gained 100% of the jobs lost in the recession. There's other states that have only added a third. And that's why the federal government, although they had a general mandate, allowed states to get a waiver if they asked for one. And the various state administrations were given the latitude to decide whether they wanted a waiver or if they wanted extra time. And that goes to my point before, is that there was almost no communication with, here we are, we're the biggest county in the state. There was almost no communication whatsoever with our human services provider before all of a sudden this was just imposed unilaterally with basically no discussion, even though there's a population of 29,000 people. Now, if we want to talk about different strategies, approaches to use, I think that's legitimate. But there was no discussion of what the strategy was supposed to be. It was unilaterally imposed by the state. And again, I have to highlight this again, because I'm not sure everybody heard it or appreciated it. Not all counties have to do it. We do, but there's other counties in Ohio that have been deemed by the state now that they're not doing as well as we are economically, so they don't have to participate with it.
All I was doing is trying to find out what other states have done this. Where are they on the opting in or out? And I assume that we knew prior to October 1st that possibility did exist, and what were we doing to plan accordingly if it didn't go one way or the other. And so you plan for contingencies both directions, not knowing which way they're going to go. So I'm just asking the question, what are the states, what did we do prior to October 1st on the possibility of that contingency?
And we'll provide you with information on the other states, Councilman.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair. Oh, I'm sorry. I just have a comment that this is a perfect storm. This is a tsunami. I don't think anybody could have planned with this last-minute drop of this lack of a waiver. This isn't something that we could have planned out. I think you've done a great job having addressed this in a last-minute situation. It's an unfunded mandate. The state decided, I think, without any kind of conscience, just to put people out without food. And this is what we're dealing with now. So I'm committed to do what I can as a council person to try to pick up the pieces to make sure people can eat, to help people get jobs. And, we're on our own. That's how I see it. The state really dropped us and dropped the people. That's who's getting hurt. So it's a tsunami, and whatever states are doing, I'll be glad to get that information, but that's not going to help our people in this county today.
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Question on this point. The funding that we're talking about is no longer available, or the mandate that's been imposed. That was known when?
Pardon me, Councilman, I'm not sure. Could you say your question again, please?
Yeah, the issue we're talking about was known. At what point was this issue known?
To the Councilman through the chair, I became as of the second week of September, I was in communication with leadership at the State Department of Job and Family Services, and they told me that as of that point, they were still considering requesting the waiver. So some point between September 15th and October 1st, and I don't have that specific date here, is when we found out that the state had concluded it would not continue with the waiver.
And the funding you're talking about, is that all included in this budget?
To the Councilman through the chair, I assume that you're referencing my referencing of like $20 or $30 a person.
Whatever we're talking about here is the county possibly picking up whatever's not being offered. Is that included in this budget?
To the Councilman through the chair, yes, it is my understanding that the expenses for overtime that would be pertinent to the 2013 period are reflected currently within our available budget, as are the two levels of resource, one for an amendment that was approved today and another for an RFP that is pending, that is already reflected in our current budget authority, Councilman.
So are you saying that the funds you have in this budget is what you need to satisfy the requirements of this mandate?
To the Councilman through the chair, I don't know the answer to that, and I don't know how many of these 29,000 people are going to say, hey, Joe, I want your help. And so I just don't know that. You know, we know some number of folks will be doing something already. Some will say, no thanks. And so really, I do not know the answer to your question as we speak, Councilman.
So of those 29,000, do you have a projection in this budget, whether it's half, a third, 10% included in this budget to cover whatever may be necessary for that population?
To the councilman through the chair, I have really no basis for that estimate yet. I believe the budget would reflect, as I understand, a continuation of the current rate of expense, but that we did not include any kind of adjustment keyed to an assumption of the percentage of folks who follow through. We'll have much more information about that in the weeks ahead. Anything I could tell you today would be pure guesswork.
So there's no provision in here to pick up any of this, any of the additional costs that we're talking
To the
about?
councilman through the chair, my understanding at the current rate of expense that our budget largely reflects that there would be some available in there. And again, that's going to depend on what the real take-up from this 29,000 individuals will be. And there will be some offsets too, you know, that if, say, you know, some number of thousands of these individuals say, hey, Joe, you know, close my case, that's going to free up some other dollars on a net basis, some of which could be allocated for those individuals who say, I need the benefit and Joe, help me get a job.
Well, how much money, if there was a request for an additional appropriation, how much should we, what's our basis? If you're saying you need more money, what you know,
to the councilman through the chair, forgive me, I don't think I made that statement that I needed more money. I think the statement that I made was I didn't yet have the experience base to know what the demand on these services is going to be.
But you project you will need additional. You acknowledge that there's been that there's an issue. You acknowledge that there are 29,000 people that you project some component of them will be drawing on our services. I understand you might not know exactly how much of that population will be drawing on our services, but they're, you know, I mean, we're trying to put together some financial resources to identify what the needs are for the next 2 years. Short of you providing any, it's hard for us to appropriate any.
And Councilman, I can only say that I agree fully that unless I had numbers to give you that I felt I can't stand up for them, I would understand why you felt you couldn't respond. I know what's happening in some other counties, again, that have had different approach. Folks in Summit County, you know, they are calling everybody in. They are getting a 40% show rate. So at face value, that makes one think that that's 60% of the folks who are not going to follow through, but what we know from our experience, or what we judge from our experience, that what's going to happen in Summit County 2-3 months down the road, a significant percentage of that population will start filing back in and create demand beyond that additional number. And if your statement to me, and I you know, which you made very respectfully, is that, you know, my numbers are in effect insufficient, I guess at this point I could only agree with you.
I guess I'm trying to understand if we're to appropriate an amount or hold a certain amount for this program, we need to at least have an understanding as to what it may be, because otherwise money may be appropriated somewhere else or may sit in reserves, and the reserve amount may not be sufficient to meet the need unless you provide us some guidance.
To the councilman through the chair, the additional lineup of resources that we have, and quite frankly, I would hesitate at this point to ask for more because I don't know about their utilization. We are going to have this overtime project, which is kind of front door, if you will, to complete the appraisal. There's an initial contract that was approved, a contract amendment that was approved today for approximately little under $500,000. We are working on an additional RFP, which we believe we can fund out of current resources at a level of $2 million. I'm sorry, I can't tell you today if that's going to be more than I need or less than I need. I just don't know.
Okay. It's hard to budget if you don't know what the need is.
We have Councilman Brady and Councilman Rogers, and I want to say we need to be mindful about, we want to see what the new building's going to look like. So Councilman Brady and then,
right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've already had my say, so I just wanted to Obviously, there's a lot of interest in this for good reason. On the 20th of November in the Health and Human Services Committee, for those who are on it and for those who aren't on it, we're going to air this issue more thoroughly, if that's possible. And we're going to have some people in from the community who may have some additional expertise to lend to us to maybe help get closer to answering some of these questions and think about what we're faced with. And so 20th of November, 1:30 in the afternoon, in this room. This discussion will continue, and some questions that have been asked by people that aren't necessarily on their committee or may not be able to come. I would hope that we would be looking for some of those answers, regardless of whether those individuals could be present at the time.
Is that 1:30 as opposed to the usual 1 o'clock?
Thank you. With your still trapped mind, Chairman, you have reminded me that it is 1 o'clock and not 1:30, and so I stand.
Okay. Thank you, Councilman Rogers.
I just wanted some clarity. Councilman Greenspan's line of questioning kind of brought some confusion. Of the 29,000, that we contact, and if we verify that they are indeed working or still qualify for the program, those federal dollars still flow to those people in support of the program, correct?
To the councilman through the chair, those individuals who continue their benefit eligibility, they will continue to receive that benefit, yes.
And so I'm confused on what additional dollars we were talking about.
To the councilman through the chair, I had not made a request for additional dollars at this point, so I'm sorry I cannot answer your question further.
Somewhat toward Mr. Greenspan.
Just trying to understand thank you. Just trying to understand the ultimate request. I'm trying to read into what's being said. Maybe I'm reading too much, but what I'm reading into is the state has opted out of a waiver, which then puts more burden on the county. If it puts more burden on the county, what resource is going to be required in order to meet that demand or to meet the waiver being excluded, and our county having to provide the resources? That's what I'm trying to understand.
Okay, well, we're going to have to try to sort this out, but the council president is waving her arms wildly that we need to move on. So if there's any more questions about EFS, we can take them on Thursday. Thank you very much. Before I turn it over, I'd like to just make everybody aware of what Director Parks told me this morning, which is that we had asked him to review, based on Metro Health Hospital's information, that we might get additional sales tax revenue from various medical benefit changes, but OBM and Fiscal Office has decided not to revise our revenue estimate at this time, stating that we probably would not receive additional money until 2015, and we don't know how much additional money we will be receiving, so they want to be conservative in our estimates. So the revenue estimates are not being revised. Okay, I now turn it over.
Wait, Mr. Chair, on that point, I'll make it real quick. On that point, was the question asked to OBM and the fiscal officer to determine if, when that revenue comes in, we're able to identify the specific revenue stream? So if it's coming in as a result of Medicaid expansion, are we able to identify the revenue specifically generated from that revenue stream, that tax stream?
That question was not asked. The question was just whether we should revise our estimates based on that prospect of additional revenue.
Okay, I'd like to ask that question, if it's able to be identified specifically to the product that Dr. Boutros addressed before council.
Director, please don't respond now. We've got to move on. But determine whether we can separately identify that revenue and let us know. President Connolly.
Moving on to item 4, I'd like to call on Mr. Jeff Applebaum for the presentation of the schematic designs for the Convention Center Hotel project.
No, I got it, I got it.
You got it?
I got it. I got it. Thank you. Before we start the schematic design presentation, just a couple quick announcements on some related matters, then we'll launch right into the schematic design presentation. Related to our hotel project, we're not going to talk about it here, but as you know, there's another item that's going forward, which is the transition on the convention center. And there is a resolution today about that that we're not going to talk about today, and there'll be some stories about this in the next few days. One thing I was asked to just simply comment on, because there was a story yesterday in the Plain Dealer about the resolution that pointed out that the resolution involves an expenditure of $3 million, I was asked to simply point out what the savings will be. Now, we're going to go through a work session, and I believe that work session is in the process of being scheduled right now. But just to allay any concerns, I did want to announce that when we go through the work session, you see the overall deal. The savings that will be generated from this transition from MMPI to our new entity in SMG will be a minimum of $3 million and probably closer to $4 to $4.5 million a year. So I want to point out that while there is a $3 million expenditure, the savings that will be generated by this overall plan will be extraordinary. And I was asked to make that comment so that people felt a little, some of you know this, I think, a little bit, but so that you all felt good about what you're about to learn. So there's going to be more about that. I do think we have a work session that's in the process of being scheduled. I'm not sure if it's been scheduled yet or not, but I think you're working on that. We do want to do it quickly, but we have that. I just wanted to point that out to you. So we're now going to launch into schematic design presentation. So where we are in the process right now, as I think you saw from the schedules I've presented in the past, we have gone through the initial exercise of developing schematic design. We have done costing exercises. We're confident enough that we're within the realm of our budget that we are able to present schematic design. Now, once again, this is an evolutionary process. This is a stage of design. There are a lot of further refinements. There's a lot of work to be done. There will be some modifications, but we're confident that what we're going to be able to show you today are basics of the building that will remain relatively intact. So as we launch into this, first of all, I'm going to introduce two gentlemen here. If I can have Pope Bollock and Bob Neal step forward. One of the items on your agenda today, by the way, is the contract for these gentlemen. So these are the principals from Cooper Carey who have been working with us nonstop on this process from day one. Don't ask who does what. These guys are the left brain and right brain of one individual. They think together, they work together, and their presentation will probably be both of them speaking as we go through this. So I'm going to ask them at this point in time to go through a presentation of where we stand on schematic design concepts. There'll be a few follow-up items at the very end of this that I'll comment on, but at this point in time, I'm going to turn it over to Bob and Pope.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, members of the council, Mr. Executive, we're pleased to be here, first of all, working in your community and your county and your city. And as Jeff alluded to, we'd like to walk you through what we've been doing and entertain any questions that you may have.
Who's going to drive?
Well, you are.
Excuse me, gentlemen, you'll definitely have to, each of you speak into the microphone when you're talking so the recording will pick it up. And if you could actually state your name into the microphone for the record, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. I'm Pope Bullock with Cooper Carey.
And I'm Bob Neal with Cooper Carey.
There are a couple of overriding goals that we began with. And the first was to look for and incorporate the qualities of Cleveland. And that's a broad statement, but we're going to flip through some slides here that are representative of that search, looking at the history, the culture, the spirit of Cleveland, an inventory of your architecture, looking at the spirit of the place, traditions, architecture old and new at iconic buildings. Looked at encouraging connections to the waterfront, the river, the bridges of Cleveland are an inspiration, and its parks. So with that, we'll move into a site plan.
Do you have your pointer? Just to orient everyone to the site plan, this is the location of the site, the mall, A&C, of course, Lake Erie to the north.
Is this more helpful to use the mouse? This is the site. Lakeside, Ontario, and West Mall Drive. The entry to the building is here. Larger site plan.
This is an enlargement of what we just showed you. You can start to see in this slide the roofs of the conference facility, which are the patterned colored roofs that we see. We have money in the budget so that those roofs will not remain a roof without any design to them. So we're looking for a green roof, at least partial with the roof and pattern, so that people staying within the hotel will be able to look out onto a designed roof as opposed to one that has not been designed. The hotel tower is north and south along the west edge of West Mall. The entrance is located off of Lakeside, and we're proposing a curb cut currently that will enter into the hotel drop-off porte-cochere area, and there'll be several lanes for automotive drop-off. During peak arrival and departure times, there could be a lot of automobiles that will be using this porte-cochere, so we want to make sure that we have enough space to be able to handle that. Off of Ontario is a separate lay-by that we're proposing for buses, so that when large groups of conventioneers or hotel guests arrive, that they can come in off the Ontario side and come into the lobby from a very similar standpoint as the people from Lakeside. Parking currently is through the county-owned Hamilton. I believe that land has been vacated for some time, and so we're bringing parking in through that location. As you look at these plans, one thing to note is that the color, the yellow, the dark yellows, that is all circulation or social areas within the hotel lobby. The pink areas are revenue generating areas, and then the grays typically indicate back of house support areas. So as you look at this, I think it would be important to understand that.
All right, so from the front door, you enter the front desk, which Hilton calls their welcome area, is directly opposite the front door. To the left as you enter, escalators. These escalators go down and connect directly into the convention center, and they go up, and then the house elevators are here as well. The pink areas that you see are meeting rooms on the ground floor and an executive conference area that's like Hilton's concierge.
We should point out at this point that the entrance level is approximately 14 feet lower than where West Mall is flush with the top of the mall area. so that when you enter into the hotel, you're entering into a 3-story lobby area, and part of that lobby area, you're looking up towards the restaurant and bar areas, which we're going up to now.
So there's a stair from the lobby that you arrive here with the bar overlooking this 2-story space and looking up and through the restaurant, which orients itself on this loggia that faces the side of West Mall Drive. The escalators are here and the house elevators here. So as Bob said, we think of this as a 2-level lobby and public space. And one of the underlying concepts here, because the entrance faces north and doesn't have natural daylight, is this slice of light on an east-west axis through all of the public spaces. Convention center hotels can be dark and disorienting. The concept here is to have east and west light on all of the public levels, so there's daylight in this space all day long, and it's an orienting factor. You can see out to views. So on the second level, again, the bar and restaurant and the living room part of that lobby lifted up 14 feet with this large bay window that overlooks the mall and out to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and to the waterfront. So it connects the site to these long-distant views of Cleveland.
Pope pointed out the loggia on the previous plan. The loggia is an area that's adjacent to the restaurant where it reaches out so that it becomes a connection to the mall area, inviting people to come in from the mall area. It activates that edge. People could be sitting out there having dinner, having meals, having a drink. And the intent is to have a major access point through the hotel at this level, so it encourages activity from the mall.
The drop-off right here.
Yeah, there'd be a separate drop-off for the hotel so that you can actually enter the restaurant, for the restaurant, so that you can enter off of West Mall. This is the first of 2 conference levels. This is the junior ballroom level, approximately 12,000 square foot junior ballroom on this level, and other breakout meeting spaces to support it. Pope had talked about the slice of light that we're looking at that runs from the east to the west. Also, on the north side, there's a large expanse of glass too, so when you're in the pre-function and social areas, you're always looking outside and always having light being brought into the space. The next level up, which is the last level of the podium, is the largest ballroom. It's approximately 22,000 square feet. Again, you can see on the yellow where is the pre-function and where all the light is being brought in from the east, west, and north. One of the concepts of this project is that the northeast corner is where our circulation takes place. So that's a very glassy, visible area. So as people move up and down through their building, they're always looking out at those views that Pope just mentioned a few seconds ago. And it also gives you the opportunity to make a decision about which one of the pre-functions to enter. So in case there's already an event happening in one of them, you can move around it.
So those levels we refer to as the plinth of the building, and out of that, on the east side rises the tower. In the first level of the tower, there's still some public spaces. That's the health club and pool area, but you start to pick up guest rooms. The next plan here is a typical hotel floor plate. The guest rooms are configured to take advantage of views both to the north and the east and west. At the upper levels, there's a 2-story function space directly off the elevators. So this is a large meeting gathering area that has a terrace that overlooks the lakefront, and this is on the 25th floor.
25th floor of the tower. All said, there are 26 guest room floors and 4 levels in the lower floors, so 30 levels all said. So I guess, accurately speaking, this would occur on the 29th level, and it's 2 levels. The lower 2 levels are parking, and we also are, one of the unique features about this project is that we're able to keep our public street edges full of activity and taking our loading. We're actually sharing the loading that exists currently for the convention center. So we'll be using the same access. We will create our own loading facilities, but they will service the hotel from that level, leaving the other edges of our building free. 2 levels currently of parking below grade. We also have a underground connection to the convention center that Pope is pointing out at that location, which is the upper level of parking. This will also be the area where people that do park their cars will enter into the hotel from this level through the escalators and back up to the lobby area.
In the search to make this building fit and belong in Cleveland and respect the group plan, we spent some time studying the buildings that define the edges of the group plan, and this is just one of a dozen illustrations where we're taking and analyzing the proportions and the organizing composition of the buildings that surround the group plan so that we can apply them to the plinth of the base in the new hotel. The other feature is found in the ground plane of the convention center, this bent plane, and you'll see that as we move into the elevations of the tower. Entry elevation.
And you can see the podium below and the lines that we were able to gather from the previous elevations that Pope showed, solid corners, the 90-foot cornice line, and so forth. You can start to see how the bent plane presents itself in the hotel tower. It's also a gesture of the hotel tower back to the convention center mall area. Those rooms will also will create some of the most unique rooms, certainly in Cleveland. The rooms will be larger, glass will be angled out so that when you're in those rooms, you'll have a clear view back to the mall area. Every hotel room in the hotel tower has views both of the water and of the city because of its orientation.
Can you repeat that? Excuse me, could you repeat that?
Yes, sir. I said every guest room in the hotel is designed with the intent to provide both water views and city views.
So the front door is here. There's a glass canopy as a porte-cochere here. Behind this large glass wall, there's a 3-story open space that the lobby looks up into, the restaurant and bar overlook, and the first floor meeting rooms overlook. And that's the big ballroom. And that's a breakout area over that ballroom. There's actually an accessible terrace there so we can step outside over lakeside.
You can also start to see the multifunction area at the top of the tower where we have outdoor deck located as well as that multifunction space that Pope mentioned.
This is the loggia, the big porch facing West Mall Drive, and that bay window, the living room to the city. That lobby living room is right behind that glass wall. The restaurant opens up here. There's an entry from West Mall Drive, as we mentioned, right through there. This is the datum of the 90-foot line of the Burnham plan, a large canopy casting this shadow. And then you see the porch up above and that function room overlooking the city.
This is the elevation, and these are direct on elevations from Ontario, and you can start to see the low rise, and this is the ballroom level here, and it actually pops up beyond the junior ballroom level, the entrance for the buses off Ontario, and then the tower. And then the view from the south, this is in the area, the service drive that's adjacent to the Global Center. And you can see the tower from that elevation. And then these are all 3 of the elevations together, so you can start to understand how the 3 facades relate to each other as you move around the building. And then finally is a 3-dimensional rendering from the lakeside area, looking back at the building and seeing the multi-purpose room at the top, the loggia, to the left on this drawing, and then the entrance to the right.
The view is looking west, and this is the corner of the convention center, so it shows that relationship to the convention center and the nature of these public spaces along the street and between the 2 buildings.
Mr. Chairman, that concludes the presentation report. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's,
Are we into?
that's.
I'm the chair.
Well, the guy before was talking about you.
Yeah.
I'm confused.
We apologize.
Yes,
That's okay.
excuse me.
Let me
Please jump
interject.
Go ahead, Mr.
A
Applebaum.
couple points to interject. In this presentation, there are a couple issues in the presentation, or not issues, but a couple ideas that are still a matter of discussion, and let me tell you what two of them are. Number one, we are still investigating parking, and I want to be very clear about this. We can, within our project, accommodate parking beneath the surface, and where you see it. There may be a different way that we can do parking and actually do it more effectively, and we're looking at this. And the concept would be, because that parking right now beneath the surface is about $60,000 per space. It's obviously very expensive to build that parking down there. If we put the parking down there, the other issue is, and you could look at this on Hamilton Court, you're taking out Hamilton Court, you're also taking out part of the first floor level because of that turnaround. So, and this is for about 300 spaces. One of the things that we are looking at is if we actually didn't put parking beneath the building but found an alternate parking solution that was just as palatable, if not more so, to Hilton, we might do that. And one concept would be directly across the street is a parking structure, that, you know, the Huntington Park Garage. And one concept would be there's 1,000 spaces there. We're already using some of those spaces for the convention center. If there was a plan to harvest more parking in the convention center, in Huntington Park, say 900 spaces, we'd have to come up with alternate parking for some individuals. But if that was comprehensively used for this project, and if we had a direct connection, there may be a way to create and keep in mind at 300 spaces, even with 300 spaces, the operator of the Hilton would still have to locate some additional spaces. I'm not saying that we're not going to do this parking, but we could save a significant amount of money, conserve space in the hotel, do something different with Hamilton Court, and perhaps have parking directly across the street. We don't know the answer to this question yet. We're still looking at it, but that's one option that we have that is under investigation right now. And that's related to another issue, which is we're still trying to decide on the final foundation system. We're having engineering work, structural work being done right now. There are two possible options for the foundation system. One is a deep caisson foundation system, and I remember when we did the, I believe when we did the I'm going to say Medical Mart, the Global Center and Convention Center project, I went through a little bit about deep, we learned a little bit about deep caissons. There's another possibility that this could be done on what's called a mat foundation. And if that's true, we could save some money, and it will also have implications for money we could save with parking. So we're examining both of these right now. The point I want to make is what you've seen here, this basic building is something that we can do. We can do it within our budget. We still have not decided on a lot of things because we're just at schematic design. We don't know, for example, what the exact treatment of the curtain wall will be. We don't know about interior finishes. We're still working on everything. But we do have some options right now, and one of them will be talking about parking. And I did want to state that up front.
Okay. Because, you know, the parking, Huntington is not in the best shape, so that's a whole other discussion.
It would be, and we understand that, so part of the investigation, but keep in mind that one way or the other, that Huntington Park Garage, something will have to be done with it eventually, so it's part of the overall evaluation.
Okay, thank you. All right, anything else or any questions? When we start down Ms. Simon and come around and.
Thank you. The parking issue, the courthouse functions, the old courthouse, by having court and having clients and litigants come in, and because of the convention parking, there's been disruption in hearings and people coming in late. And I'm going to say that to take more parking spots away from that is going to hurt the people who come down here for divorces, for probate, and Court of Appeals. It's been disruptive already, and I'm not going to support taking away more spots.
The only way
that we would do that is if we found and if there was a solution for alternate just as close parking, and we're looking at other alternatives for that. So we wouldn't simply take that parking away. We would figure out another solution because we need a solution for people who are in the Justice Center as well. So it would be part of a comprehensive plan. But keep in mind, if we don't put the parking in this building, that we're going to have that issue anyway, because even 300 spaces won't make. We're going to need some alternate parking. This is why we've already gone to the Group Plan Commission, why we're already engaged in some studies. So there's going to have to be an alternate, longer term and better term solution. But we're mindful of exactly what you're saying. We wouldn't simply take those spaces away without an alternate plan.
Yeah, because your arguments of access to legal services that you have to provide. I agree with Ms. Simon, but this is something we can discuss another day and maybe have a special meeting.
I just wanted to address it, but that wasn't really my original question. Was with regard to the obstruction of views from other buildings. Steve Litt from the Plain Dealer wrote about making sure that the skyline is clear, and some of the offices downtown. People stay down here because they have a view of the lake, and we're losing a lot of businesses to the suburbs and want to keep them here. And if it, want to make sure that that's been addressed, which I'm assuming it has.
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Concern about when you build this hotel,
The loss of views.
loss of view from the surrounding offices that have views of the lake in particular. And now they're going to have this building in their views.
Elevation.
Yeah. So this was an issue which was addressed, and the way this was addressed, if you remember the original rendering, it had the tower actually extended east to west, and that would have blocked views to the lake. For example, for my building, Key Tower would be an example. So one of the things that was done here very carefully was to take the tower and actually make it go north to south. So from a vision point, the view to the lake, it's a much narrower blockage, and it's actually a narrow tower. So from those views south of it, you can look to the left, to the right. It takes much less of the vision plane while providing a much better vision plane for the people in the building, because now they all have views to the lake. So that was something that the design team was mindful of when they reoriented the building.
Mr. Shrine? Oh, yeah, I think so.
That was a good, quick jump down there. Some questions as far as operation. The rooftop, I'd heard that the top of the building was going to be able to be utilized like some of the big Chicago buildings and stuff like that. I didn't hear that reference, but I can only assume that we're not just talking the meeting space, but we're talking about all the way to the top of the building.
That's correct.
Okay.
We're providing the multi-purpose space up there to be used however it wishes to be used.
Glass wall or something like that. I assume it takes in the wind off of there.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it gets a little windy here. I heard a connection to the convention center. I didn't hear a connection to the Global Center for Health Innovation, our medical mart. Is that by design? It's going to be connected also, I hope?
If you actually go down into the concourse level, what you'll see is that you have there's the connection on the north side of the concourse level. You would just walk in, and if you walk straight south, you walk right in to
okay, so you're going to go out
center,
into the general area as
into
opposed
the concourse to come back. Now, we could put another connection further south, but it's only really 80 or I don't know how many steps, 100 steps or so. So it may not be worthwhile doing that. It's something that we have talked about, but I think right now to make a grander connection where the connection is makes more sense.
Okay.
But we're looking at that. We're also looking at that with conventional wisdom, and SMG is going to weigh in on that as well.
It just would seem that there'll be times when there won't be a convention opportunity, but it might be a connection to the Global Center. So
that is actually still under investigation.
Okay, thanks. Connectivity to one of the visions that's being thrown around here in town, the Skyway connection. I'd heard that there's a possibility that this could have a fly-in for that, and I don't know whether that. And I've heard there's some funding that's now been sourced out there for connection directly from this building to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I didn't see any reference to that connectivity. Is that going to be at least kept open, whether or not it's a solution or not?
we're certainly mindful that that's out there, and if there is funding for it, and if there's something that could be done, we'd certainly look at it. Right now, it's not incorporated into the building, but if there is a proposal with funding and the ability to do it, it wouldn't be. There's nothing that would necessarily preclude it. You'd have to see a lot of development of that concept.
But we're high enough that we can get the connection off the ground that we could be able to find a spot.
Presumably, we don't know yet quite enough about the concept.
Yeah.
So certainly we're not closing our eyes to the opportunity. And I've had some conversations with the gentleman who is proposing this, who also happens to be my neighbor.
It would be pretty iconic for our town to have something really unique if it could be worked out.
We're listening, but obviously the key there is, I'm not proposing that the county fund that effort. Obviously, that would have to be another party that would come in and figure out why it would be beneficial for us to hook up to that.
Well, but what you have to do is build it in connection to have a place to bring the cable cars directly into the hotel, at some point, or some kind of.
We would only do that right now if there was really a concrete plan for making that happen. I will say right now that we're not building the port for it. There is a podium, so theoretically you could do something, but we're not building this into our plan right now. But we're not, if there was a way to fund it, and if there was a discrete plan for it, it wouldn't be prohibited. But we're not actually designing, the hotel with the contemplation that will occur, such that if it didn't occur, we would have a port with no use in the hotel.
From your standpoint, because you were on both the convention center and now, you're on the hotel, we're going to be using a common set of driveways for the back office, for the trucks, for all the drayage that comes in for a trade show, and probably some mini shows will be at the hotel. Who wins when there's competition for the space, and who has priority, which inevitably happens at any huge convention, as you and I know?
The county will win.
Which building wins? I'm sorry.
The docks are separate. So there's going to be a separate set of docks for the convention center, which are on the east side, and then a separate set of 4 docks for the hotel on the west side. So there's no competition for space on the docks. We can actually. I don't know if you take the mouse here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I saw where they're using the common driveway, though, isn't it?
And this is, yes.
And sometimes these conventions can be bringing in 15, 20 semi-loads of equipment and stuff simultaneously.
There will be a dock master who is there. It's no different than when there's 2 events even at the center. There'll be a dock master, and his role is to, he'll know in advance when the deliveries are coming, and his role as the dock master is to manage the dock to make sure that everybody gets entry and gets to the place where they need to get. This is not uncommon. If you look at Gateway, you have the one entrance for both the stadium and the arena, and there's a dock master, and they come in. So that we don't see that as a problem.
Okay. And parking, I think it's a great idea to tap into both sets of parking if we need to figure out a solution in some way, shape, or form. Just like McCormick Place in Chicago, the hotels and the convention center are both figuring out a way to share space. Now, granted, Ms. Simon's point is that you got the court system as a third party in there. But and then last one is security. When driving in there, with the world having changed and hotels being a vulnerable component nowadays of national, international security in the drive-in, what have we thought about as far as being able to stop vehicles from never getting in there if we need to for a secured event?
We have a security consultant who's on board, and we intend to have those conversations with that firm, which we have not to this point, but it certainly is on our agenda.
Because we clearly need to be able to stop all vehicles at some point from being able to get underneath that area for a highly secured event if we're someday when we pull those off here in town. So I just want to make sure that we're thinking about that. I'm sure you guys are. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Mr. Greenspan?
Question. I know this, my position's been pretty well known, so I'm not going to restate my position, but at what point will this council be more knowledgeable as to the total cost of this project? obviously you have to develop the plans, and you're doing that now, and there are various options, but at some point, the question's been consistently asked, at what point, if the council decided to vote no, when would that be? And obviously, a component of that is understanding the cost.
We have a detailed budget for the project right now. We update the budget on probably a weekly basis. And at this point in time, and by the way, we're happy to share the budget with you. At this point in time, it's still a work in process. So, and it's subject to change every day. By way of example, if we modified the parking, that's a very large change in the budget. So the budget is moving as we continue to do the development. It's moving daily, but I have no problem with sharing with you or any member of council at any point in time exactly where we are in the budget.
I'd just like to say that I know Mr. Applebaum always makes himself available. If individual members of council want to meet with him on specific points, I think that would be advisable to ask, some of these small detail type questions. And Mr. Gallagher, I'm sorry, were you finished, Mr. Greenspan? Okay.
My point is, I'm not going to belabor my position, but I just think it's important, because my vote's not changing, but I want my colleagues to at least have an understanding as to when that ultimate go, no-go decision will be made. And my concern is tonight, we're voting on 4 items relating to this that expend about $30 million related to the project. And so we are moving down the path, and I don't want this body to get to a point where the perception is we can't say no because we're too far down, we've spent too much money.
Let me offer this as an additional response. Right now, our sources and uses are balanced on the project. The expenditures, sort of where we are at any given point in time, we are developing a cash flow. So another item we'll have to you. What do you think, Ellis? When do you think we'll have a cash flow that will be ready to? We'll probably do that within a week, I would think. Within a week, with these contracts, what we can do is we can lay out sort of a cash flow so that you can see on a week-by-week basis exactly what we are expending under these contracts and as a percentage of total project cost where you are. And if that'll be helpful, this is part of the normal reporting process, so we will have a cash flow, we will have a budget, and we'll share it with council. At this point in time, it's not worthwhile for me to make a very detailed presentation on all aspects of that budget simply because it's still a little bit in flux as we define these building elements right now.
All right, Mr. Gallagher and then Mr. Jones. And we do have an executive session, and we're supposed to start a meeting at 5, so.
I'm very critical on architecture, and I was amazed at how you took such a large building across from the county courthouse and almost built its futuristic sister across the street, leaving Ontario open. So, just to leave that vista open, placing it across from one of the iconic buildings in the county, if not the iconic building in the county, which is sistered with the City Hall and attached to the malls, I thought it was a fantastic job, and look forward to more.
All right, Mr. Jones?
Abatement and demolition is to start at the end of November, scheduled for late November. We have a public outreach meeting on the 20th. Can you tell me a little bit about that outreach meeting, how it's set up, where it will take place?
Mr. Jones, I hate to cut you off, and your question is very, very important, but I think that we probably can do this at another time because we do have an executive session and we have to start our meeting. So if it's possible, maybe you can give him like a 2-minute answer or something.
Yeah, that would be.
I'll give you a 10-second
Okay.
answer. The meeting on the 20th is actually, that meeting is actually the next in a series of public design meetings. So that's what that is. That's not the outreach. I'm not sure what meeting you're thinking about.
It's during project design schedule, you gave us a...
Yes. That meeting, that's the follow-up meeting. So on the 20th, we're simply going to go to the public. We're going to take these design concepts you've seen, and we're going to explain how they incorporate what we've already heard, and we're going to ask for additional public comment. That's what we're going to do on the 20th. That's what that meeting is.
Okay.
Okay?
All right, any other questions? And like I said, we can make Mr. Applebaum and the other gentleman available. We thank you very, very much for your presentation.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Okay.
And Madam President, if they could share with us the location of that meeting.
It's at the downtown Cleveland Public Library, and I'll get you the, do you remember what time it's at, Ellis? I think 5:30. 5:30, I think it's 5:30 actually is when that starts.
All right, is there any, thank you, gentlemen. And where did you come from? You're not, right. You're not from around these parts.
Why do you say that? No, we're from Atlanta, Georgia.
Both from Atlanta, oh, okay.
And they very much appreciated the weather today. I will
Yeah,
tell you that
we
one of
set
these
this weather
gentlemen
up.
showed up without a coat and was surprised that he needed one, so.
Okay, any miscellaneous business before the body? And any public comment unrelated to the agenda?
There is none.
We have an executive session which will last for about 15 to 20 minutes. All meetings of the Cuyahoga County Council are open to the public under the Ohio Public Meetings Law. Under that law, council may go into executive session during the meeting for specifically authorized purposes. During executive session, council confers outside the hearing of the public. Council may not make any decisions about any matter in executive sessions. All decisions are made in public. This evening, council will go into executive session to discuss pending litigation and privileged attorney-client communications. Is there a motion? And so everyone's going to have to leave the room that's not involved. Is there a motion to go into executive council for the stated purposes?
I so move. Second.
By Mr. Miller. Folks, could you please keep it down? Moved by Mr. Miller and seconded by Mr. Germana. Madam Clerk, will you call the roll?
Moving to executive session, Ms. Simon? Yes. Mr. Greenspan? Mr. Miller? Yes. Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Mr. Germana?
Yes.
Gallagher? Mr. Schron? Yes. Ms. Conwell? Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Rogers? And Ms. Conley?
And is this Mr. Hudson? Is this a student we have? Okay, all right, we got to kick him out too. Don't leave, you got to come back. You can leave your stuff if you're coming back, we won't steal it.